Okay, but we are in this, in the Pride number 5, the curse that follows Reuben's sin. And this was 8th Roman month, 8/30 of 2003 is when this sermon was given, okay? And it covers pages 113 to 122, and this, again, in the first book of Yisrayl. And this main subject of this sermon, as we've been delving into and looking at, is that illegal lust begins the process of confusion in the mind. And that's where it actually starts. It begins in this lust, this thought process of lusting after someone that doesn't belong to us. It actually begins the process of confusion of the mind. And I think we kind of looked at, thinking about how we can run through, we can think of situations in our heads, we can think of situations in our mind, and we actually start to have a physical reaction to that. And that was one of the things I think we kind of finished up with last week, was how these thoughts, when we actually harbor these thoughts, those illegal thoughts, that they somehow turn something loose, that it works with in conjunction with the heart, and there are certain things that are withheld in the body. And that as long as we don't harbor, as long as we don't dwell on these thoughts that pop into our mind, then they're held at bay. They're held imprisoned, so to speak. But when we harbor these things, when we think of these things, we allow these things to enter, and we dwell on these things, and we start this lusting, that somehow unlocks. It's a combination that unlocks between the heart and the mind. It unlocks something, and these things are actually set free. And it begins this process that we see here of this. It begins the process of the confusion of the mind. And you can kind of see how Pastor covered this feast. How the floods, how they imprisoned the coronavirus in through the layers of dirt, but it was the sins of mankind that brought these things back to the surface. And so if you can kind of think of that, it's the same thing that goes on within us, the same type of thing that goes on within us, okay? So the scriptures, again, that we want to reinforce is in Genesis 49, 1 through 4. Again, these are the characteristic traits of the sons of Yaakov, and these are what was going to be seen in the latter days. And in the latter days, it would be made manifest. It would be easy for us to see. And the one that we're dealing with specifically here is Reuben, where he says, "You will be turbulent like water, and you will no longer excel." And then we can see the abomination here of what brought that, of what was done here, where he went up unto his father's bed and onto his couch, and how he defiled that. So, again, this is all started with this. It all started with the lust. And Yachanan 1:1, we heard a lot about this during the feast too. Isn't it amazing that this sermon was given back in 2003? And how Pastor is expounding on it, was expounding on it just this last feast. I mean, just within the past week, he was expounding on these things, and he was expounding on, on the plan, on the plan of Yahweh, which this is also part of the scriptures that we need to reinforce for this lesson. In the beginning was the plan of Yahweh, and the plan was with Yahweh, and the plan was Yahweh's. It was Yahweh's plan. And you see here that word plan, it means his whole plan and his purpose for mankind. And we also see here in Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, we see the characteristic traits of the priests that were described again in Genesis chapter 49. Her princes are roaring lions. Again, the characteristics. What is their characteristic traits that they have? It's not Ahab, it's not mercy, but it's the characteristic trait of roaring lions, of wolves who seek and who devour. And her prophets, it shows that her prophets are light. They make an empty show with mere words. And these words, they're actually treacherous. They're untrue. They're fables. And the scriptures actually show that mankind would actually turn to these fables, that they would, that these prophets and these preachers of the world, they would actually tickle their ears with these smooth and lying words, that please the people, that lets, that the words that they tell them the words that they want to hear, not the words of correction, not the words that would lead to correcting correcting what's causing the sin, not correcting the sin, which is the result, which we see is resulting in what we see in the world, but they want to have their ears tickled. They want to be told that they can do what they want to do and yet still have salvation. And that goes back to the ancient mystery religions. Remember when we covered that the priests, and this is what these priests did here. But the one of the things that drew the masses to these ancient mystery religions was that the priests then would always change to meet the needs of the people. Whatever it was the people wanted, the priests would change their teaching to satisfy that so they could have their followers. That's not what Yahweh does. Yahweh, we need to change to meet the needs of Yahweh. We have to change. Yahweh calls us and gives us the opportunity to change to be just like him. And in order to qualify to be a part of that family, that's exactly what we have to do. And he gives us the means and the abilities to be able to do that. He gives us our righteous teacher who explains and expounds the scriptures to us and tells us step by step what it is that we actually need to do. And he not only teaches us in words, but he sets the example for us. He sets that true ahab. He has a true ahab for this work, the true ahab for Yahweh, and that true ahab for every man, woman, and child here. And the true ahab for every man, woman, and child that is yet to come. And that is what we need to become. That is the image and likeness that we need to be in. We need to be in that same image and likeness, just as Yahweh is. And then we see here other scriptures, Jeremiah 23, 20 through 22, where it shows that the judgment of Yahweh would not return until he has executed and formed the thoughts of his heart. In the latter days you will understand it perfectly. There's not one word of Yahweh's prophecies that are going to be left undone. Everything that is going to be done, that Yahweh prophesied is going to be done, will be done. Okay. And then continuing on here, we have 2 laws, and these 2 laws were also expounded on and taught throughout this feast as well. Positive law number 172, listen to and obey Yahweh's anointed servant, the overseer of the house of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 18, 15 through 18. And then right along with that is positive law number 174, listen to and obey Yahweh's anointed priests, the body of elders, under the direction of the overseer of the house of Yahweh. Then you see that's in Deuteronomy 17, 8 through 13. Okay? And then vocabulary words that we're going to be on the lookout for. Some of these we've already seen. Some of those, Yahweh willing, we'll get to tonight. And then those that we don't get to tonight, we'll finish up next week. But this word idol, remember, it's not a stick. It's not a piece of wood. It's not a stone. But it's making yourself into the likeness of a god or Satan or the adversary or the devil. It's taking on those characteristic traits. Being evil like the gods, just as it shows there in Genesis chapter 3. That presumptuously means to be proud, a proud man or pride, arrogance, to seethe. That's one of those that we saw toward the end of class last week, was to cause the mind to boil and cause it to move in confusion. And this is how that whole process begins. And then Reuben, he was, the characteristic trait that he showed, and I don't know if we're going to get into that one this evening or not. Yeah, we should. But it's unstable. It's haughty. It's that presumptuous pride. He lifted himself up. Remember, that's the characteristic traits of the adversary, of Satan the adversary. But it's haughty. It's boastful. It's recklessness. And it's also they feel that they have this licentiousness, which is a license to sin. And then also you see filthy in Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 1, which means rebellious, and then polluted in Zephaniah 3:1, which actually shows that means defiled. And then finally we see this word impetuous here, which means acting or done suddenly with little thought. And this is what we don't do. This is what we don't practice here in Yahweh's house. We have to stop and we have to think things through, and consider those options, just like the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program tells us, to make sure that the things that we're doing are within the bounds of the law. Okay? And then just real briefly, just what we've covered so far, here is humbling yourself as a little child is the only way to enter into the kingdom. Okay? Kind of in a nutshell, that's one of the things that we've covered so far. There's no other way to enter in the kingdom. There's not any back door. There's not a secret entrance. There's no other way in other than humbling yourself as a little child. Pride, disrespect, and trespassing, that's going to keep you out of the kingdom. That will keep us out of the kingdom. And that's disrespect, not only to ourselves, but to others. Not humbling oneself, what does that do? Not humbling ourselves, it actually slows down the mind. It keeps the mind from performing as it should. It actually interferes with the thought processes. And we also saw where Satan is trying, her attempt right now is she's trying to destroy the family life Yahweh's way. And she's doing it through a number of means. And one of the main means that she's doing it with is through the entertainment industry. That is one of those ways. There's other movements and stuff that are that have taken place throughout the years. That have, tried to take that down and diminish the office of a husband, to diminish the office of the head of the household, and to actually bring it to nothing. And you kind of see that attitude, and it's a real shame to say, but if you take a look over the years, you can actually see how that has diminished. When I worked with the school district, and this has been, oh man, guys, it's been over 20 years ago. Well over 20 years ago. I worked with them for right at about 10 years, and throughout that 10 years, I could actually see, in that 10-year period, from the beginning to the end, I could actually see the attitudes of the children toward not only the authority at the school, but also the authority of their own parents and how they treated their parents, and it went right downhill. And it was to the point where the children were actually ruling over their parents. Whatever the child wanted, the child got. And that in and of itself, man, is a fulfillment of prophecy. Prophecy shows that the children are going to rule over their parents. And that's what we saw. And that's been at least 15 years ago, probably closer to 20 years ago it was probably closer to 20 years ago. And I couldn't imagine what it's like now. But that stereotype, that teaching is being pushed forth from not only the 7 hills of Rome, but also from Hollywood, from the entertainment industry. And it is teaching people to become presumptuous, to be proud, and to hate those who bring forth the truth. And this is again what people hate. People hate to be taught. They hate to be corrected. They don't want to be corrected. That's different with us here in Yahweh's house. We should crave the correction. If we're doing something wrong, we should desire to be corrected. Please show me where I'm going wrong. Please show me what I'm doing wrong. Please show me what is keeping me from having contact with Yahweh so that I can fix it. That should be our attitude. But the proud and the presumptuous, they don't want that. They don't want us to have that. They don't want that at all. So we left off over here on page 117. And if you're following along, and Yisrayl says, it should be about verse 51. And it shows here, it says, let's go with that to Genesis 49. And Pastor shows this man, Jacob, knew the laws of Yahweh. He knew some of the things that Yahweh is showing us today. He was a priest. He was trained in the law, and his children who practiced these laws were taught humbly to follow them. They were some of the greatest priests who ever lived, and Yahweh used them extremely in his work, clear down to the days of Yeshua, to the days of his death. Their work is still being used today, even as ours will be throughout all eternity. And that should take on a whole new meaning with everything Pastor is bringing out about the plan of Yahweh and about how the prophets were taught. So we too, he shows here, we too are doing a work right now that you could be so much a part of and have your name written along with the others, just like it was in Azariah and Nehemiah's time. Or you can rebel and actually have your name erased from it, where as if you were never a part of it. We have the choice. We have that ability to either to have it recorded or to have it erased. If you take a look, if you take a look at the screen there in Yeketskia chapter 18, verse 24, it's a very familiar scripture, or should be to us. But it says, when the righteous turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and does according to all of the abominations that the wicked man does, should he live? So they've come to Yahweh's house. They've been told the truth, but yet they rebel and they turn from these things. And they do all according to the abominations that the wicked man does, should he live. All of his righteousness that he has done will not be mentioned in his behalf. See, because he rejected that. They turned and they went back to that old way that they came out of. They went back to the mud. They went back to wallow in the mire. Just like a dog, when a dog returns to his own vomit. That's a pretty disgusting thought. When a dog vomits something up and turns around and you look and he's sitting there licking it up, that's a pretty disgusting thought in our minds when we see that. But that's how it looks when someone turns from the righteousness, these beautiful laws of righteousness that bring peace and joy and true health, when those are rejected, to go back to this foolishness that's out in the world that brings nothing but sickness, disease, and death. That's how it appears. And maybe if we keep that kind of in our minds, maybe, if these tempting thoughts ever come to our minds, maybe if we keep that thought in our mind of how that looks, maybe give us something else to think about. But he continues on there. He says, and in his trespass that he has trespassed, and in his sin that he has sinned, in them he will die. See, this is exactly opposite of what Genesis chapter 3 tells us. This is part of that Genesis chapter 3 shows that lie that Satan told Eve. You will not surely die. The prophet here says, yes, in his trespass that you have trespassed, in the sin that you have sinned, in them you will die. Then in Revelation chapter 3, verse 5, it also shows that he who overcomes all of these things, the same will be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot his name out from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his Malachim. And this is what we're striving to do. This is what we are striving to do. We're striving to attain that perfect righteous character. Okay? And if we go back to the book here, about verse 52, it says, we are speaking of a man here, Jacob, who called his sons. He knew in his heart what sin brought. He knew in his mind what sin brought and what sins would occur to that person after they did this. Genesis 49:1, then Jacob called his sons and said, gather together so that I might tell you what will befall you in the last days, or in the days of your lives. I want to tell you what you have done and show you what is going to take place in your lives. Gather together and listen, you sons of Jacob. Listen to Yisrayl your father. Now highlight this. Highlight this next part here. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, exceeding in rank. This is how he should have been. This would have taken him through. The man could have been spoken of as the tops in the kingdom, but because he did a dreadful thing, he committed a sin, and this released certain things in his body. It took certain things into his body, and Jacob knew it was going to bring him down, and he wouldn't excel. Now, highlight that whole part, what we just read. Okay? From Reuben, you are my firstborn. We're going to start there on the bottom of page 117, and we're going to go all the way to the end of that paragraph. Okay, all the way to where it says, yeah, it took certain things in his body, and Jacob knew it was going to bring him down and that he wouldn't excel. Look at this next part here. It says, turbulent like water. Yeah, you think about the turbulence in the water. You've seen rapids and things like that, and just how turbulent, how violent it can be. And you can see there are hidden things within these rapids. They have rocks that are hidden in there that can cause major damage if you hit it. There's deep water. There's shallow water. There's whirlpools that'll suck you down. There's all kinds of different hidden things. But this is what it's talking about: turbulent like water. This is what he experienced because of these sins. This is what it put within him. It says, remember the seething as we just read, and I will show you how to tie it together in just a little bit if you will pay attention. Turbulent like water, you will no longer excel, for you went up under your father's bed, under my couch, and defiled it. Notice it says here, he actually defiled himself here. He actually defiled himself here. The sin that he committed was in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 24, and then again in verse 30. If you want to cross-reference that there, you can just cross-reference it there. But this is how he defiled himself. Leviticus 18, chapter 24, Leviticus chapter 18, verses 24 and verse 30. He said he defiled himself when he first started lusting after his father's wife. That's what he did. He did it right when he started doing that. What was this wickedness spoken of about Nimrod? Remember that. Remember this what we learned in the booklets, true stories about Christmas, about Easter, about Valentine's Day, about all of these pagan holidays. You can see here, wasn't that all spoken of? Wasn't Nimrod involved with all of this? It's all part of that Nimrod system. It says this was part of Nimrod's sin. He made himself like Nimrod when he did this. Okay? He took on the characteristics of Nimrod. Well, what was it? If you remember, we covered, the cycle of God worship and what all is tied in with that. And it's a bunch of licentiousness. It's all around fertility rites. It's all has to do around with sexual sins. I want to show some of this here. If you take a look, at the cycle of worship, it has to do, and you can get this in the Deceptions Concerning Yahweh's Calendar of Events, okay? But you had the birth of the sun god, which was around Christmas, which originally moved, from the first Roman month, the sixth day of the first Roman month, from 1/6 to 12/25, okay? 40 days after that birth, so if you take that 1/6 and you take 40 days after that, you come up with 2/14, right? Okay, so 40 days later, the mother goddess is clean for fertilization. Okay, you see the mixture of righteousness and evil here? Because Yahweh's law says a woman is not clean for relations for how many days after the birth of a male child? 40 days. You see the mixture of righteousness and evil there? Okay. So you can see that. And then this Valentine's Day, it's the festival of Lupercus or Lupercalia. And you can read about, we can read about that in the booklet on Valentine's Day. Okay. And then after that, after the vernal equinox, which is an equal period of day and light, then what takes place is the mother goddess now is fertilized by who? By the sun god, who has now become the father. Look at the sexual sin that is involved here. And this is what is tied into all of these pagan holidays. They all center around this thing. You see what's being honored when people follow these things, and they don't know. They don't know who they worship. They don't know what they're doing. And then after the summer solstice, which is the longest period of daylight, then of course the days start getting shorter, and then it's at that point the mother goddess now kills the father/son, and then the mother goddess, then she mourns for the death of the father god and longs for the rebirth of the son god, which takes place. Then she gives rebirth to her son, again, on that December 25th. And the whole cycle starts over again. So it's a whole incestuous cycle there. You see how evil that is. But that is what is taught, and that's what's behind that's what's behind these rituals and these holidays. Okay, verse 54, it says, Reuben had the same bloodline as Simeon, Levi, and Yada. Okay, the same bloodline. He could not blame his bloodline. It was not coming from Jacob or Leah. He did something here to ruin his mind. See, he did something. There was an act that he did that ruined his mind. He couldn't blame it on his bloodline, on his breeding. He couldn't blame it on that. This was a choice that he made here. It was something that, according to the prophets, his father would not even speak of. It was so dastardly that he would not even speak of it, even to his dying day. It ruined Reuben's mind. You see what it did? It ruined the mind. To bring confusion and violence like the word seethe means. Remember the definition of the word presumptuous. Remember what presumptuous means. Presumptuous means overstepping due bounds. It means taking liberties. It's overstepping bounds, overstepping your authority, taking liberties. Oh, I can go ahead and do that. I don't have to worry about what the rules are or what the law says. It's going beyond what is proper. It's sin. It's violating the law. The law tells us, we are instructed in the right and proper way to conduct ourselves in the house of Yahweh. And the right and proper way to conduct ourselves in the house of Yahweh is governed by Yahweh's perfect 613 laws. Okay? And it's presumptuous when we go beyond what is proper. And this is what Reuben did. That's that definition of that word presumptuous. He presumably thought he could do this and get away with it. That's what Satan thought back in Genesis 3. And she was able to convince Eve that she could get away with it. Man, this whole world is convinced that they can get away with doing whatever they want to, breaking any one of Yahweh's laws, and get away with it. It's that license to sin. They can do whatever they want to, and they don't have any consequences for it because Jesus did it all for them. That's not what Yahweh says. This is a twisting of the word. This is what the unlearned and unstable, they twist the words to their own destruction. And 4/5 of the earth's population is going to find this out very, very soon now, that those words have been twisted. And they're going to have a very hard lesson to learn. But what they're going to be going through, men, is temporary. Because it's in Yahweh's plan. They are going to be resurrected. They are going to be given the opportunity. They are going to be given the opportunity to do exactly what we're doing here now. To convert and to have the ability to have eternal life. That's what they're going to be offered. Men, we're being offered so much more. Because we are having to prove ourselves by believing what's written in the scriptures without actually seeing. They're going to have 6,000 years of history of what sin brings, along with 1,000 years of what following Yahweh's laws brings. And they're going to have that to compare. And then they're going to be able to make that choice based on what they've seen. Not only what they've experienced, but what they've seen. Okay? But he presumably thought he could get away with it. What would have occurred, do you think, if he would have asked the priest, is it all right if I go into my father's bed and take my father's concubine here? Can I go ahead and do that? What do you think, Pat? What do you think the priest would have told him? Hell no, man. Are you crazy? And he says there are women all over the earth who you could commit this sin with. He says, That is what we find as examples of what was said by the other people who did ask the priest, and it saved their lives. Asking at Abel is not a weakness. I've heard it said. I've heard it said by people who are no longer here. People they can't make a decision on their own. Well, no, we can. We're making the decision. We're going to ask at Abel. We're going to ask the priest, and then we're going to follow that guidance. That's what we do. There's not a man that is here. Not a priest, not a deacon, that doesn't have counselors, that doesn't go to the priest and ask if there are questions. We do it all the time, or we should be doing it all the time. Because of that very thing, because in doing that, we're going to get the counsel that will literally save our lives. It's going to keep us from making a wrong decision. If you will just pay attention, you will know what I'm saying is true. We have scientific evidence that this actually takes place now. In these last days, they're actually finding out what I've been preaching for almost 50 years now is actually what the scriptures say is coming forth now scientifically in their tests and studies. In Genesis 35:19, so Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Notice where they lived. By the way, around Abelin. Bethlehem is just over the hill from Abelin. Over her tomb, Jacob set a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Yes, it does. It's still there. I told you the first time I went to Israel, I was on a tour, and they took us to Rachel's tomb. This rabbi went there and went to pray, and I guess the Catholics went there and they started counting their beads, Then he says, then Israel moved on again, and he pitched his tent beyond Migdal, that is Tower Eder, while Israel was living in that land. Now, he did not take his whole family at that time. He left part of his family home, thinking he could trust them. He had work to do. So he was going to do the work of Yahweh, and he had to go. He had no choice. Woe is me if I don't do this work. And this, you can cross-reference that with 1 Corinthians 9:16, if you want to. Or it says that yet when I preach the message, it is not a basis for me to boast. Truly, I am under compulsion, for woe is me if I do not preach the message. This is what we're here for. We stand in our place, whatever our job is in Yahweh's great house. It doesn't matter if we're sweeping the floors, if we're cooking the food. It doesn't matter where our place is in Yahweh's house. Because in having a place in Yahweh's house, we have a part in this work, in this preaching that is going forth. So in order to fulfill this, what we have to do, we just have to stand in our place, whatever that is. There's no small place in Yahweh's house. There's a place for everyone, and that's what causes this house in this city to function smoothly, as everyone has a job to do, and we do it well. But while he was away, it shows here, while the cat's away, the mice will play, right? And Pastor shows here, says, this is the saying of Christianity, and that is what they do. While the husband or the owner is away, the mice will play. And Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs chapter 7 that shows that with the seducing adulteress. Okay, if you want to read that, you can see how that whole thing, how that whole incident played out here. But while Israel was living in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now Jacob had 12 sons, and notice that's all of it. The sons of Leah, that was the firstborn Reuben. That is what Jacob said when he was telling him what was going to take place. It says, turn back to Genesis 49 and get this in your mind. That is how it occurred. He said this in Genesis 49:4, turbulent like water, you will no longer excel because you did this. He says he had the same breeding, but because of this one sin right here, he opened up something in his mind, and that's, Pastor's reiterating that. He's really hitting that hard about these sins. They open up something in the mind, and it actually causes a physical reaction. It causes something is released, and the mind starts to break down, the body starts to break down. It doesn't, whether we realize it or not, it's what it's doing. Man, it's just like our vehicles. Changing the oil. If we don't change the oil on a regular basis, man, we don't see the damage. Yeah, so what if we let it go 20,000 miles, 30,000 miles? Oil light kicks on. Now let's put some more in it. It's still running okay. Is it? What kind of damage is being caused that we don't see? Does it matter if we don't believe that there's damage being caused? Oh, the car sounds fine. It's still running okay. I'm not having any issues with it. What kind of damage is being done internally? We don't see it, right? We don't see it until that damage gets to the point where the vehicle just can't function anymore. Gauges get pegged, lights start flashing and coming on, smoke starts coming out, starts putting along, and then all of a sudden, here we are stranded alongside of the road. Well, I don't know how that took place. It's because we didn't take care of it. Okay? And it's the same way. Just because we don't see it and we don't see the results of it immediately, it doesn't mean the damage isn't being caused. And that is, I think, one of Satan's great deceptions. Because you could see it. You could actually see it in her words back in Genesis chapter 3. You could almost hear her saying, well, Eve, I've been doing this stuff for years. Look at my beautiful complexion. Look at this. Look at my beautiful hair. Well, yeah, look at my beautiful hair. Look at my beautiful complexion. Look at my smile. Does it really look like that by me practicing these things and being like the gods, does that really look like it's causing any harm? Is it really, Eve? Come on. Just look. Look at all of this. But you could see the enticing words. You can see those smooth words. And it caused Eve, Eve chose to believe the lie. And she chose to believe the lie rather than Yahweh, is what she chose to believe. And then now we see the end result of that. Or we're going to see the end result of that. It says, but what did he get? Something left over from his father that he should not have gotten in his body? How did this go? When you're dealing with billions of computers, how can you rightly know except in test after test after test, like billions and billions of tests that have been done? I've told you before that Yahweh has the greatest laboratory, and here a while back I was reading something from NASA that was sent to me. It was like talking about seeing the original laboratory, and I thought, this is fantastic, because they understand. He says they understand. They understand that there is lab work being done out there. Before Yahweh ever formed man in 7 days, he had it all figured out. Yahweh just didn't throw it together. He had a plan from the beginning. A carefully thought out plan from the beginning. Exactly what to do and how to do it and how to bring everything together. Every nook and every cranny without leaving the I's dotted and the T's crossed. He had it all figured out. He put that man together just like the scripture says. He had it all figured out before he did it. And when he did it from the stuff of the earth, just as he said that he did. Everything that has ever been brought has proven just that. They will not accept it, and yet they won't until they see the dumbass being born as a donkey. This is soon to take place. Watch what I say. That is prophecy. The only thing this man did was this sin right here that took place. The word there instead of turbulent, okay, this is one of the vocabulary words, okay? This word turbulent. The word there, instead of turbulent, in the King James Version, it says unstable. Okay? You're going to see this one again. So, turbulent. It says unstable. It means haughty. It means lifted up. It means like presumptuous pride. Remember characteristics that Satan showed. They're in Yeketsky and Isaiah. It means boastful. Remember how she boasted? Because of her beauty and her pride, she lifted herself up. And this is what he took on. It means reckless licentiousness. What do we see out in the world today? A reckless license to sin, which means he thinks he has a license to sin. Let's turn over to Judges 9:4. They gave him 70 silver shekels, about 1 3/4 pounds, from the temple of Baal Peor, which Abimelech used to hire worthless and reckless men. The same word, I have to mark this here. The same word is what the authorities say is speaking of the same thing that Reuben became because of this sin. They gave him money to hire these worthless, reckless men. And let me see here, all right, so I'm going to kind of jump ahead because I kind of put this in the wrong place here. But want to take a look at, anybody familiar with Baal Peor? Anybody ever look into that? Okay. Praise Yahweh. Baal Peor. And this goes right along with the sin that was committed here. Okay, Baal Peor, it means Lord of the opening. And it shows a god of the Moabites. This comes from BibleStudyTools.com. It means a god of the Moabites worshipped by, notice, obscene rites. So you can see what was being practiced here are the very sins that were written there in Leviticus 18. It's so called from Mount Peor, where this worship was celebrated, the Baal of Peor. And what does that mean, that mount? Praise Yahweh, uplifted place. Keep that in mind for just a minute, okay? Keep that in mind, that mount, that uplifted place where this worship was celebrated. And the Israelites fell into the worship of this idol. And now, remember what that word idol means. It's not a stick, it's not a stone, it's a way of life. It was characteristic traits that they mimicked, that they took into themselves. Okay? And then from the JewishEncyclopedia.com, it says here that it's commonly held that this form of Baal worship especially called for sensual indulgence. The context seems to, I'm just going to use their words here, the context seems to favor his view on account of the shameful licentiousness into which many of the Israelites were enticed. But notice what he says here. He says, but all Baal worship encouraged this sin. All Baal worship, all Lord worship, encouraged this sin. And Peor might not have been worse than many other shrines in this respect, though the evil was certainly flagrant. And that word flagrant, okay, it means conspicuously offensive. It means they didn't hide it, especially so obvious. I mean, so obviously inconsistent with what is right and proper as to appear to be the flouting of a law or morality. So, in other words, it goes back to that disregard, that utter disregard. And then an archaic meaning of this word flagrant means fiery hot, burning. What are some of the diseases that are caused by this licentious behavior? One of the symptoms of that is burning. Okay? A physical burning of certain parts of the body. Okay? And then ultimately it would actually result in that. Ultimately, it would result in this 1 hour burning is what it's going to result. But remember, it comes from an uplifted place, right? That Baal Peor, or that mount, that Mount Peor, the uplifted place. What uplifted place do you think that's coming from? Right here. Okay, look right here. You've got the 7 hills of Rome. You've got 7 uplifted places right here. Okay? You see the Quirinal, the Quirinal Hill, Viminal, Capitoline, Esquiline, Palatine, Caline, and Aventine Hill. And so what you've got is you've got those hills that are right here. That's those 7 hills there. And then right here, the Vatican sits right there. Okay? And so here, of course, you see St. Peter's Square. So St. Peter's Square, sits right here on Vatican Hill. And then you also see the Hollywood Hills, the Hollywood sign. Look where that Hollywood sign sits. It sits up on a hill high over that area right there. It sits up on a mountain, that uplifted place for all to see. Hollywood is the teachers of the world, right? Where are they getting their teachings from? Right back over here, the 7 hills of Rome. If you remember, the Vatican actually has an office there in Hollywood to regulate the entertainment industry. And I think that was done in like 1929, I think is when they established that office, if I remember correctly. But you can see that's where these teachings, it still comes from there today. Okay? And people are emulating those gods. And it's so easy, man. It's so easy for that stuff for those things to be allowed, to be seen actually, allowed in our homes through music, through television, through movies. It's through all kinds of different media. The internet makes it so easy for these things to get in. We've got to be careful with what we allow to be put into our minds. Because once those thoughts get in there, those thoughts can potentially do what? Those thoughts can potentially unleash something within our bodies that actually begin to destroy the thought processes and how our mind is working. It can begin to deteriorate that, and it can also begin to deteriorate the body. That's what Pastor's showing us. So we've got to be so careful. We've got to be on guard. Like it's written, it says we have to be on guard, 24 hours a day, because Satan walks about like a lion, wandering to and fro, back and forth, seeking whom she can devour. And so she wants to attack, and she wants to destroy this mind. Because she wants to break that connection. She does not want us to have that connection with Yahweh. She's fighting against that tooth and nail with everything that she has. She wants to keep us from making that connection. But through our determination, through the fasting and through our prayer, through our studies, through guiding our minds and keeping our minds focused, man, we're going to make that connection. Yahweh shows us that. Pastor shows us that. We're going to make that connection, and we're going to need it. We're going to have it in order to get through this time period. Okay, so if we go back to the book here, Pastor tells us here, about verse 66, if you're following along, and Yisrayl says, it says, turn over to Zephaniah here. Here's another that they use to describe what he's saying when he says, Reuben became unstable. Now highlight this here. When he says, beginning here with it, where it says Reuben, it says Reuben became unstable. Start highlighting there. We're going to highlight all the way down until, I'll let you know where. So highlight this. It says, Reuben became unstable, worthless, restless, someone who makes the wrong decisions, who can't use his mind properly, and continually makes the wrong decisions all the time without thinking or without being able to think clearly and to make a rational decision. Okay, end your highlighting right there. So we're going to highlight all of that, because I guarantee you we're going to see it again. Okay? But let's go back here. Let's look at this again here. It says, Reuben became unstable, worthless, restless, someone who makes the wrong decisions, who can't use his mind properly, and continually makes the wrong decisions all the time without thinking or being able to think clearly and make a rational decision. Okay? And if you go back to what the law says, in Deuteronomy 28, where it shows the blessings that come from keeping Yahweh's law and the curses that will befall us if we choose, because we simply do not obey Yahweh our Father. Remember, that's why That's what the law itself says. That's why these things come upon us, right? Because we simply will not obey. We simply make the choice not to obey Yahweh. But look in Deuteronomy chapter 28, 28 and 29, it says, although it says Yahweh will afflict you with madness, Yahweh will allow you to be afflicted with madness, with spiritual blindness, and with confusion of mind. And this is the things that are going to be allowed. The spiritual blindness, not being able to see, not being able to understand. As Pastor has said, why are we here? Why did we come here to begin with? And the confusion of mind. And then in verse 29 it says, and you shall grope at noonday, reduced to blind helplessness. Just as a blind man gropes in darkness. You think about trying to find something in the dark. If you get up in the middle of the night, you don't want to turn the lights on, and you're somewhat familiar with how the house is laid out, but what if somebody puts something in the wrong spot? You didn't, or you put something in the wrong spot. You forgot it was there. And you take that path you normally take, and you run into it in the middle of the night. Okay? That's kind of a shock. When your toe comes up against something that you've misplaced or whatever. But you think about how mankind, how they're groping for answers. They don't have any answers. They're putting their trust in mankind. They're putting their trust in the creation. And this is where they're putting their trust in creation, in mankind, in mankind's own wisdom, in their own thoughts, rather than in Yahweh. They are not putting their trust in the Creator. They're putting their trust in the creation rather than the Creator. Okay? And this is why they're groping. And as long as they do that, man, they're never going to have answers. They will never find their answers when they do that. And that's what Deuteronomy says here. It says, you will not be successful in any of your ways. You will only be oppressed and robbed continually with no one to rescue you. As long as we maintain and keep going in that way, we're going to continue to suffer until they turn to Yahweh. And slowly but surely, and we've seen the numbers, we've seen the number of countries, and we see how that's steadily increasing, how people are turning to Yahweh. And that number is going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to grow. And one of these days, in the not too distant future, these gates down here are going to be flooded. And men, you think you're busy now? What do you think is going to take place in that day? Our workload will have just gone up 100-fold. But we're going to be able to handle it because we're already practicing what we're doing, what we need to be doing. And we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep doing. We're going to keep working. We're going to keep this machine. This family is going to continue to operate in unity, and the unity is going to continue to grow. That's all it's going to do. It's going to continue to grow. The more we practice these laws, the more this unity is going to grow. Okay. And Pastor shows here, he says, this is what we're seeing among several world leaders right now. Then they go and blame each other for it winding up the way it did when they finally see they're a man born from a dumbass, and when they wake up and see the results of their own hands and irrational decisions. Okay? They blame each other. Oh, it was this group over here. No, it was this group over here. These two groups say, nope, it was this one over here. Now it wasn't them, it was them way, way, way over there. In describing this way, they give the scripture in the same wording. The same wording is used that brings forth what occurred to Reuben, because he did this dastardly thing. I guess Reuben probably saw this. I hope he did when the man was born from the dumbass. Maybe he saw it, maybe he didn't. In Zephaniah 3:1, woe to her who that is filthy. Okay, that's another vocabulary word. Okay, remember, we're going to see that. That is rebellious. And polluted, another vocabulary word, that is defiled. So filthy means rebellious. And that polluted, it means defiled. That is defiled, the city of oppression. Yes, we see this in our cities now. We see whole cities being brought down with the same sickness right now that is going on and being pushed forward in Hollywood. Whole cities, yes, even Abelin, Texas is affected by this defilement in this corruption, this disease, this whole world, as the scriptures show, is affected by it today. She did not obey the voice of Yahweh. She has not received correction. That is why she went this way. She has not trusted in Yahweh. She didn't trust in Yahweh. They trusted in their own heart. She didn't trust in Yahweh. Have you, he says? Are you? No, pastor says, not yet. She has drawn near to her father. When she sees the son born to the dumb ass, she will realize that what her ways have brought her. He says, you will too, as we see it in the news, what the world's ways has brought. Her princes within her are roaring lions. Her judges are evening wolves that do not even leave a bone for the morning. Her prophets, notice, her prophets are light. They make an empty show with mere words, but they are treacherous, untrue, deceitful, betraying people. Her priests defile what is holy, and they violate the law. All of this is in the same word that describes what Reuben took into himself in Genesis chapter 49, verse 4. It's all in there, and we see that word here again in Genesis 49:4. This is that turbulent like water, where you will no longer excel, for you went up onto your father's bed, and onto that couch you defiled it. Okay. Wantonness, like boiling. He says, remember the word seethe. We just got through studying about boiling or overflowing water, recklessness, extra vengeance. All of this comes from the result. It's born out of this sin that Reuben committed. All began with a lustful thought. Look to the prophet Jeremiah, because he speaks of this too. This is also given by the experts on this, on this language. So to keep those things in mind, men. That seethe, that moving in confusion, and that's all we see in the world. That's all we see that's going on in the world today, and it's all as a result of what Reuben of what he kicked off there, when he committed that sin. So, I think, men, that was a fast hour. But I think, man, we'll go ahead and we'll stop here. And Yahweh willing, next week we'll go ahead. Oh yeah, we'll get things finished up next week, and then we'll be ready for a test. Praise Yahweh. So with that, man, Yahweh be with you. Yahweh bless you. Yahweh willing, everybody had an awesome feast. And Yahweh bless you, and Yahweh bless your work week. Keep you safe.